happening, everybody? I think we got to the last second of the countdown. There's no way to know because Jacob went dark on us doing the countdown. He's trying to turn his video off. So he goes, all right, guys, you ready to go? And he's going, and then he turned his camera off. So I just had no clue where we were. So I made an educated, because I could count down from 5 in my head.
I feel like you nailed it.
I was like, this is probably the end of 5, but who knows for sure? I made my best guess. Maybe did I go like 5-3 and I forgot about a 4? Maybe. So if we started a second early, a second late, apologies, guys, but I'm doing the best I can here. And if you can do the best you can, just like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We do appreciate that. We are sponsored by DraftKings Rainmakers here today. I was not here last week. I was away. I was hanging out with my family. It was my mom's birthday last weekend. So spending time with them, especially because I had a big NBA week where I knew I had a lot of work that was going to be going into it. So I have been working basically like 16, 18 hours a day. So having the Saturday off to spend with my family last week was much needed for me, but I knew that Neil and Matt Bellman could hold down the ship on the NFL strategy show here. And how did last week go for you, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, Bellman, always a great fill-in, but we're also happy to have you back, Greg, on the show. That was, I think, the first show that you have missed in the years that I've been doing it with you, at least. I know I've missed a couple, but I don't think you've missed one yet. So, you've earned that day off. Yes, last week went okay for me. There was a point in the afternoon slate where like I was creeping up towards break even and like thinking I was going to go profitable because I had a lot of JSN for one, and like there are a lot of players, and I had double the field on Travis Kelce. So for a little while it was looking like, okay, I'm going to have a nice, really profitable day, and then things started happening that were not in my favor, and I ended up, kind of losing like $100 or something. Like nothing too crazy, but didn't end up being a profitable day for me. How about you?
Yeah, so it was a wash for me. I did really well on FanDuel and less so on DraftKings, but I had some live lineups on FanDuel. A big part of what did help me on the slate last week is I had built my lineups assuming that DK Metcalf was not going to play.
Yep,
then I got to a lot of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Unfortunately, also a lot of Tyler Lockett, but it's not like they were in a lot of lineups for me together. But JSN was one of the best value plays on the slate. And I had some live lineups on FanDuel late in the day. It was like I just couldn't get all of the pieces to come together. Like I would have won the milli on FanDuel if I got, I think it was like 25 fantasy points out of Cooper Kupp. He had a dud. And then I had like one other lineup as well that was live. I'm trying to remember who was. Oh, it was a Lamar Jackson Ravens stack that looked really good early. And then it was the Chiefs lineups with Patrick Mahomes, ended up passing that one. So overall, it ended up being like a wash of a slate because it was like I doubled up my money on FanDuel and then got like 50% of entry fees back on DK. But live lineups, which always at least makes the slate fun. And we've got another one to break down here as well. A note for you guys that we found out shortly before the show that Sam Darnold is not going to be starting a quarterback this weekend for the 49ers. It looks like it's going to be Brock Purdy, who's back. We haven't seen very many players make it back in 1 week from the concussion protocol. Brock Purdy, who actually kind of got hurt on a tush push play, got hit in the head, ended up dealing with a concussion, and he was playing really well prior to getting hit in the head and then really struggled afterwards. So all week I've been assuming that Sam Darnold will be the starting QB for the 49ers. And at least as of the time we're doing the show, we do currently still have Sam Darnold expected to start. So that's being updated as we are speaking, but that's kind of the intro to the quarterback position here. What stands out the most to you about the quarterbacks this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm disappointed to lose the Sam Darnold value. I think I was going to play Sam Darnold and just he's been in so many bad situations in the NFL that I was like, okay, now he's in like the best possible situation for a quarterback because the game manager might take off. So I'm a little bit disappointed to lose the Sam Darnold 4,300 game, but not that disappointed because I really love the high end of quarterback this week. Like Jalen Hurts looks incredible in our tool. Jalen Hurts was like the first thing that I saw when I looked at this slate is like that Commanders defense has just been giving up huge games over and over to opposing passing games. And now they get the Eagles, which has just been elite all year. So I really, really love Jalen Hurts and Eagles stacks. And we have them a little bit under owned in our tools as well. So that was, add a little bit to my love. Lamar Jackson, once again, going up against Arizona. Like it's really hard for me to want to get too far away from the high end, just because I think that they are going a little bit under owned. And that's what we have in terms of top stack odds. We have Philadelphia with an 11% chance of being the top stack. We actually don't have Baltimore as far up there in terms of top stack. I guess they're not that. They're 7% top stack odds. I just missed them there. Both of those elite quarterbacks look great to me. I think those are going to be a big part of my lineups this weekend, figuring out exactly what I'm doing beyond those players. But I think I'm going to have well over the field, I think, of both Lamar and Jalen Hurts. As of right now, that's my plan at least. How about you? Are you doing anything differently?
Yeah, so looking at the lineups that I have built, I'm actually finding it a little bit difficult to get all the way up to the high end at quarterback for a couple of reasons. That they're expensive. But then the
Yeah.
other thing too is that their combination, the guys we want to pair them with, are also really expensive. So if you're looking at like Tua, for instance, we'd want to be pairing him with Tyreek Hill, but it's kind of hard to do that because of the salary constraints. Jalen Hurts, you'd want to be combining him with AJ Brown, also kind of hard to do because of salary constraints. Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce, that is the high end stack I get the most of, but I still have single digit exposure to Patrick Mahomes because of pricing concerns. And there isn't really an abundance of value on this slate. We don't have these like super cheap running backs that are projecting really well. We don't have a bunch of super cheap wide receivers. So I actually am finding myself going a little bit cheaper at quarterback just because those lineups with the expensive quarterbacks, there's a reason they're lower owned. They're very difficult to get to.
Yeah, and that is a very good point. Like when the stacking partners are that expensive, it definitely does make it tougher. Might have to, make some concessions, maybe play a Dallas Goedert in there in my Jalen Hurts stacks and some of them. It'll be I'm gonna have to force them in. Like I think that these are plays that like optimizers are not gonna love. It sounds like you ran the Sims and the Sims don't love it either, but we do have, at least in the initial Sims, some positive leverage on both Jalen Hurts and actually not on Lamar. We have positive leverage on Jalen Hurts in our current boom bust duel, which I like to see. I just needed that permission to play Jalen Hurts. We do have some negative leverage on Lamar Jackson, so maybe I won't go too crazy there, but just so hard for me to get away from those plays in particular. The ownership is getting there too, though, so it's not like you're getting great leverage on the field. I didn't even mention Mahomes, the most expensive quarterback on the slate, also playing against Denver. The defense has looked a little bit better recently for the Broncos, so like it hasn't been the Commanders have still been just getting crushed by even like terrible teams. It seems like the Broncos have picked it up a little bit, but certainly Mahomes is somebody that like I'm not going to be full fading Mahomes either, and probably pairing him mostly with Kelce, as you said. So you are right. Like it's going to be tough. We're going to have to find some value. Hopefully, we can find some value at other positions throughout the day and leading up to Sunday to allow myself to play these quarterbacks that I really want to play. But I know that I'm going to be forcing in at least some of these guys. Maybe I won't get up to triple the field like I want to, but I'll probably be at least 150% of what the field has, something like that.
So with that in mind, where my exposure is leaning at quarterback is more like the cheapish in the mid-range. My number one most rostered quarterback for this slate, Neil, it is Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott has a matchup against the Rams. The game is expected to be fairly high scoring relative to today's games. I was talking about this with Lofty on the show we were doing yesterday, and I don't know if you've taken notice of this. Games are way lower scoring this year, and it's really being reflected in the totals. We had games pretty regularly in recent years. You'd see games 52.5 total, 54, 55. Not only will you rarely see games even close to 50 points, most games have totals below 40 points now. So when you look at this game between the Rams and the Cowboys, 45.5 points, which just a year ago would have been considered a fairly low total. That is the third highest total of the entire slate. The only games with a higher total, Denver, Kansas City, Miami, New England, and all of those points are expected to be scored on the Miami side. And then we've got Cowboys Rams 45.5 point total. And the price point on the Cowboys, it's fairly cheap, right? Dak Prescott on both DraftKings and FanDuel, reasonably priced. You got CeeDee Lamb also reasonably priced as a wide receiver. You're not paying the same premium on him that you are on like the Tyreek Hill types of players. So that's where I'm landing the most. Dak Prescott stacks, getting him with CeeDee Lamb, getting him with Jake Ferguson, tight end is pretty hard to fill behind Travis Kelce. Is Prescott somebody that you like getting to this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cowboys have a 26 implied team total, one of the highest on the slate. As you said, the Rams 20th in terms of pass DVOA, not a prohibitively expensive stack to get to. Like it's at least a little bit cheaper than the high end, particularly with Dak being pretty inexpensive. We have Dak at what is the price tag? 6,100. Third in the top stack. So let me make sure I'm sorted right. Yeah, third in the top stack, 9% chance of being the top stack currently. Yeah, it's hard not to have some interest in Dak. I guess we'll talk about the pairings later on, because it's kind of interesting, like trying to figure out who to pair Dak with sometimes. We can talk about that once we get to wide receivers. But yeah, I would imagine I'm going to be with you on Dak. We've only got him at 9% projected ownership. Looks really good at 6,100. Yeah, hard to deny that.
Yeah, 6,100 on DK, 7,300 on FanDuel, all fairly cheap price points for a quarterback who I know it's been a disappointing season for Dak. But one other thing, too, to consider when it comes to him is that he has had a lot of pretty difficult matchups. He's gone up against the Jets, New England, which generally plays at a slow pace. He was also on the road against San Francisco. And we've only seen one game the entire season where he went for over 20 fantasy points. That was last week against the Chargers. And then something else that I think hurt Dak is even in some of these games where they did have better matchups, they won by so many points that he didn't really have to throw the football that much. Like, remember that just destruction of the Giants to open up the year. They won the game 40-0. So you can look back at that and say, well, Dak only threw for 143 yards. Yeah, but he was like out of the game in the third quarter. So we've seen a lot of spots where Prescott has played well, against the Patriots. He throws for 261 yards and a touchdown. But the score of the game was 38-3. He just didn't have to throw the ball very much. So last week, we finally see a spot where the Cowboys won. It was a competitive game. He had to throw. He played well. So that's the spot I'm getting to the most. Dak Prescott. What other quarterbacks do you like on the cheap or mid-range side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the homer in me that's going to lead me back to some Kirk Cousins. Like, it is a little bit cheaper without having Justin Jefferson in there. You can get to the stack a little bit easier for the Vikings. I guess the price are coming up a little bit, but 6,900 for Kirk Cousins against that Green Bay defense that is 25th in terms of pass DVOA, 26th in terms of rush DVOA. Like, the Vikings should be able to put up points against that Packers defense. And, of course, if Justin Jefferson was in there, I would love playing some Justin Jefferson. But without Justin Jefferson in there, it just becomes a little bit more condensed, the target tree, and a little bit cheaper. So I'm going to have interest in playing some Vikings. Outside of that, like, I don't think that I'm going to any, Powell this weekend, Sam Howell this weekend for the Commanders. I don't know that I'm going to go to any Gardner Minshew. Maybe I'd go to a little bit of Derek Carr against that Colts defense. Like, it's Saints have a 22.25 implied total. Derek Carr has been throwing it deep and just not really connecting. Like, if one of these weeks, like, he just finally connects with Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, I think he could put up a big score. It hasn't happened yet, but the fact that he's taking shots makes me a little bit interested in playing some Derek Carr. I don't think I'm going to the Jaguars Steelers game. Man, do we want to go to any? I'm blank. Zach, the Jets quarterback. I'm blanking on there. Zach Wilson. Do we want to go to any Zach Wilson here? It's a decent spot. I still don't really trust Zach Wilson, but he has looked a little bit better recently, which is not really. It's pretty faint praise to say that Zach Wilson is playing the best football of his career so far, but he has been. And the Giants are a pretty middling defense. So maybe I could consider going there. I don't know. Do you have any interest in Zach Wilson this weekend?
No, not okay. Zach Wilson at all. There are a couple of cheap quarterbacks I like. Zach Wilson is not one of them, though. So a couple of very cheap quarterbacks in both FanDuel and DraftKings who this is why I like them. Kenny Pickett and Derek Carr. I don't like them individually as quarterbacks, but the quarterback position when it comes to fantasy scoring, it can be pretty wonky, right? Like, we saw, what was it, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? I'm trying to remember the time frame. It's not all that important to the example I'm using here. Desmond Ridder was maybe the worst quarterback on the entire slate and had a good fantasy game and ended up being in the GPP winning line. Like, he single-handedly lost the Falcons a game and was the Millie Maker winning quarterback on DraftKings for that slate. I think there's passing volume upside in both Kenny Pickett and Derek Carr in their matchups, and they're both very cheap, especially on DK. Kenny Pickett is $4,900. That's an absurd price point. Like, this is.
I don't think I'm going to get there. I understand the play. I agree with you that price is too low. It's just the Jaguars defense pretty good. Steelers have an implied team total under 20. So I don't think I'm going to get there with you on Kenny Pickett. But if you have interest in Derek Carr, he's somebody that I've already been kind of contemplating. I think that I probably will be with you on Derek Carr. Like, I just think the deep shots at some point, if they can hit two of those in one game, like, he's just going to take off really quickly, and it hasn't happened yet. So definitely with you on Derek Carr.
Yeah, it's really just price. So it's the price point and the fact that there's just limited value on the slate, right? If this was a scenario where we had a bunch of good cheap running backs to get to, or like cheap wide receivers, I would feel differently about it. But Kenny Pickett's 4% owned. He's sub 5K on DK. More so a DraftKings play than a FanDuel option. Not that he's unplayable on FanDuel or anything like that. But it's really, he's so cheap. He affords me the salary to be able to spend up at other spots. And the difference in Kenny Pickett in our projections versus the really highly projected quarterbacks, it's not that crazy of a difference. Like, for instance, the difference in projection between Kenny Pickett and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence projected for right around 10% ownership. Lawrence is projected for 18.5 fantasy points. Pickett's projected for 15.5. The difference, I mean, you're looking at a 3 fantasy point difference, and also like some of the combinations you could stack Pickett with. Whereas if you look at the high end wide receivers to the low end wide receivers, like it's a way bigger gap than 3 fantasy points. So I'll hold my nose. I'll play some Kenny Pickett and just hope he doesn't totally suck this week. And if he's able to put up, like 15 fantasy points, I think he's live to be in a milli making winning type lineup. Anything else you like at quarterback?
CJ Stroud, getting him at 5% ownership against this Panthers defense. He's been just like a pretty condensed target tree there as well. We have no Robert Woods this weekend. So Nico Collins, Tank Dell both look a lot better. So yeah, I'm probably primarily playing CJ Stroud with Nico Collins, but I do think that you can pair him with Tank Dell as well. Dalton Schultz, a few options there for CJ Stroud, and he's just been so good. And the Panthers defense has been so bad that I think I'm going to take some shots on CJ Stroud. Maybe you want to play the top 2 picks playing against each other. I think that is the best case I can make. Second best I can make for Bryce Young. The best case is we have him at 1.7% projected ownership, 2.4% chance of being optimal. So a little bit of positive leverage on Bryce Young. I actually think I'd rather go to Bryce Young, take those shots than Kenny Pickett. They also handed over play calling duties to a new offensive coordinator instead of having the head coach calling play calls. So a little bit hopeful that maybe they can get other receivers involved. So I'm a little bit interested in playing a 5,100 Bryce Young against that Texans defense, which has been, better against the pass than against the rush, but they are still 22nd in terms of DVOA, 22nd against the pass, 22nd against the rush. So historically, they've always been much worse against the rush, but they've also been pretty bad against the pass this year. The Panthers do have a 20 implied team total. So I actually think that I'd be more inclined to go there than to Kenny Pickett myself. But yeah, I think that ends it for me. I'm a little bit interested in playing that quarterback duel, both sides of it. Obviously, I prefer the Texans, like the good side of it, but I have some interest in the Panthers with the offensive coordinator taking over play calling duties. Bryce Young, a little bit deeper into his rookie year and a great spot against the Texans.
All right. If you guys haven't done it, do us a favor, like, subscribe, follow. We appreciate all of that. And shout out to DraftKings Rainmakers, who is sponsoring the show today. If you guys haven't checked out DraftKings Rainmakers yet, sign up using the link we have below. You are going to get a totally free starters pack, which very affordable price point, free. And you could win real cash prizes with those free cards because you're going to get a full set of cards, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. You can use that to play in free contests. And if you win actual cash prize. So go check out DraftKings Rainmakers and sign up using that link that we have below. Let's talk about some of the running backs here, Neil. And this is a position where I have some guys that I really like quite a bit, but it's more on like the mid-range to highish end. Are there any real pay-up options that you are liking a good amount at running back?
Yeah, so I'm refreshing. I just got the news that we are updated with the Brock Purdy news. So just give me 1 second to toggle over to running backs. But yes, I think that there are some interesting pay-up options if I remember, but let me 1 second. So we have Christian McCaffrey on the high end. 16% projected ownership, 16% chance of being optimal looks okay to me. I don't know that I'm going to get to a massive amount of Christian McCaffrey just because of the price tag, but he's been just like, his usage is so great that you can basically always play Christian McCaffrey, like no matter the matchup, no matter the price tag, he's just like always live to put up 3 or 4 touchdowns. I think that he took a little bit of a hit in usage last week, so we'll have to monitor how he's feeling.
Last couple of weeks, by the way, he had 15 carries last week, 11 carries the week before.
Yeah, and I thought he looked good. It was sort of surprising me. Like he looked like I was a little bit concerned that with the oblique he would look a little bit worse, but I thought he looked like he was as speedy as ever out there, but lost a little bit of usage. So I guess some concern there with the usage. Wait, do we have? I don't think I'm going to a ton of Saquon Barkley against the Jets. I'm thinking about it. They do have a couple of their key defenders back this week. His usage has been so good, and I think that Saquon Barkley has looked pretty good too. So it's a little bit interesting at 4% ownership, but I don't think I'm going to get there a ton to Saquon Barkley. Derrick Henry looks really good in the tools. We're projecting for under 2% ownership with a greater than 4% chance of being optimal. Of course, there's going to be trade rumors swirling around Derrick Henry all weekend. Like, I don't know whether I should be factoring that in at all. Probably not. I mean, if he's coming in under 2% ownership, it's not the best spot against the Falcons. A little bit more of a pass funnel defense. So I'm surprised to see how much he is popping. The Titans just have a 16.5 implied team total, but Derrick Henry is one of those players who has historically been like, he can crush in a bad matchup. He's been doing it for years. Like, you see him at 1%, 2% ownership, and he goes off for 3 touchdowns against like the best run defense in the league. So he is just one of those running backs that you can always play if you want to. You're going to, in your Dak stacks, do you think you're going to play any Tony Pollard like with Dak?
I am underweight to the field on Tony Pollard. Pollard's also expected to be popular. He's expected to be north of 20% owned.
Yeah.
And another thing too, when it comes to a couple of things about Pollard. Number one, he has been involved in the passing game, but not quite as much as he was last year. He also just looks a step slower this season than he did a year ago, where Tony Pollard last year, like, it was just the last couple of years, just like, why is Zeke playing? Why is Zeke playing? Give the ball to Tony Pollard more. Give the ball to Tony Pollard more. And now they've finally gotten rid of Zeke. And I think it just might have been like a year too late. Pollard's 26 years old, which doesn't seem super old, but it kind of is for the running back position. And I do think he's lost a step this year. He's averaging less than 4 yards per carry. He only has 100-yard rushing. In fact, he only has one game with more than 75 yards rushing. His last few games, he rushed for 30, 29, and 47 yards. So you can combine him with Dak, but that's not really my preferred way to go about building lineups. To find a running back that I'm overweight to the field to that has somewhat of an expensive price tag on him, it is Alvin Kamara for me. He is actually the only running back 6K or more expensive that I'm currently overweight to the field to. And it's for 2 reasons. Number one, this is DraftKings specific, not FanDuel when it comes to Alvin Kamara, because the workload in the passing game is ridiculous. Alvin Kamara, 14 targets last week, 8 targets the week before, only had 3 the game before that, and then 14 before that. He's now had, 11, 25, 39 targets in 4 games, averaging nearly 10 targets. So if I like Derek Carr as a quarterback, this is one of those situations where it really makes sense to stack a running back with the quarterback, just because he is the most targeted player on this team right now. And I don't think that Alvin Kamara is expensive enough, especially on DraftKings, considering what his recent workload has been. So he's the only running back 6K or above that I'm overweight to.
Yeah, and we have him at 20% ownership. It's so tough because like, if you can count on those double-digit targets, like that, you rack up PPR points so quickly on DraftKings with the target volume he's gotten. Part of me is like, that just feels so unsustainable, but I think that you can include him in your Derek Carr stacks. I mean, we talked about how much interest we have in Derek Carr. I think Alvin Kamara, given the target volume he's getting, if he breaks one off, certainly helps both of them. So I kind of like the idea of pairing him with Derek Carr, given the target volume. I'm a little bit torn because part of like the thesis behind the Derek Carr play for me is they break off 1 or 2 of those long passes, but you can break off 1 or 2 of those and still get a lot of peppering of Alvin Kamara. So I think you can probably pair them together and even include a Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed in those kind of stacks. So yeah, Alvin Kamara kind of interesting. I don't know that I'm going to be above the field. I don't think I can get there with you. But yeah, 7,300, the price feels a little bit too cheap for DraftKings. The ownership is the only reason that I don't think I'm going to go crazy with him, because we do have him at 20% ownership. I'd rather go to the elite quarterbacks getting low ownership. So just kind of flipping the script of the usual build for me. So I'll probably go into some cheaper running backs. A couple people in chat noting, and I was going to say Tony Pollard, it might be just that he broke his leg. Like, it could be not just the age cliff. It's the age cliff. It's also just he's coming off a broken leg last year. And I do think like the last game, we saw him in a primetime game break off a long run that I think would have been a touchdown last year. And they ended up catching him this year. So I do think that he has lost a little bit of a step there for Tony Pollard. And I don't know if it's just the age or the broken leg, but hopefully he can, continue to build up and get a little bit faster, get back to his regular speed. But yeah, I think that I'm generally going to be going a little bit cheaper at running back. Like, just looking at all of these elite running backs, like none of these guys are going to be a huge part of my Sunday.
Yeah. And I mean, when I was just talking before, if I don't have exposure overweight to any running back who's, 6K or more expensive, it means I'm going to be trending on the cheaper end of running back as well. And then also one other thing on Tony Pollard, the reason that running backs age as quickly as they do and why 26, 27, 20 is like ancient for a running back, it's because of those injuries. People in the chat are saying, well, Tony Pollard's coming off a broken leg. Yeah, that's what happens. Running backs stay healthy for like a year or 2 into the league. They start racking up injuries, and then they're just not the same anymore, because you also think like all right, he's trying to come back from a broken leg. And how is he doing it? By getting tackled and getting hit a whole bunch. So it's just hard for these players to stay healthy. And then even once they suffer an injury to ever make themselves all the way back. So
that's a good point.
So with Tony Pollard, you can't even make I understand that his production might be suffering from the leg injury, but like that's always going to exist. And that's what these guys always end up dealing with. But where I'm really prioritizing my running back exposure is going a little bit cheaper. My most rostered running back overall, which I don't think is going to be a surprise to you, Neil, because this is a guy who I've liked in other weeks recently, Breece Hall. Breece Hall is finally the guy for the Jets now. I've been playing him ever since we had that first game against the Broncos, where it seemed like he was going to be the guy in the backfield. And now we've got stories that Dalvin Cook is asking for a trade. It's like, come on, man. You were a free agent with no market, and now you think there's going to be trade demand for you?
Right. Like after you showed how bad you are this year, like suddenly other teams are going to be like, yeah, we're going to trade for Dalvin Cook.
And if nobody wanted to sign him when they didn't have to give up anything, he was just a free agent. You just had to sign him to a min contract and people didn't want him then. Like, what is the trade demand going to be like for him? So I don't know if the Jets just don't dress him this week or give him 0 touches, but I think that's far more likely than him playing a substantial role. So I think this is going to be the Breece Hall show both this week and going forward. I think he's the best running back play on both FanDuel and DraftKings for this weekend. I love getting to Breece Hall. How do you feel about him in the mid-range? I think he's underpriced on DK and FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Breece Hall is one of, like, should be 7,000 at the very least. Like, he's way too cheap given his role and his talent right now. 5,900, particularly on DraftKings, is just way too cheap. So I'm with you. I think I'm probably going to be overweight to Breece Hall. He's going to be a big part. I don't know that I'm going to go like totally crazy with it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I'm like close to double the field on Breece Hall, and it's not like he's getting no ownership. So maybe that is going a little bit crazy with it. I'm with you. I love Breece Hall, and this is why I think that I'm going to be able to get up to some of the more expensive quarterbacks, is just flipping the script a little bit. Like, you get Breece Hall in there at 5,900, that helps a little bit for your salary savings. So I'm definitely with you on Breece Hall. Moving on down the line, I think maybe I'll play some Gus Edwards against the Cardinals. Like, not a sexy name, not somebody you love to click, but 5,500 Gus Edwards against that Cardinals defense. He's gotten pretty nice usage, 3.5% projected ownership. He looks pretty interesting. Then you get into that Houston Carolina game. Dameon Pierce looks really good to me. 4.3% projected ownership, 5.5% chance of being optimal. Hard for me not to like Dameon Pierce against that Panthers defense. And then on the other side of it, I think you can also go to take your pick between Miles Sanders or Chuba Hubbard. That's a little bit tougher because, as I said, take your pick. Like, we don't really know who's going to be getting the volume there. I do think it is a bit of a split backfield. So not, you don't love targeting split backfields, but I think that the prices are low enough that you can at least consider both of Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. So, getting into some of the a little bit cheaper options. I also think you can play he's getting 0 ownership right now, but I think Cam Akers started to carve out a role last week, and it wouldn't be that shocking to see him continue to carve out that role. I'm not like counting on it, but I think that there's a world in which Cam Akers gets really serious volume here this weekend. There's also a world in which it just goes straight back to Alex. Like, I don't really know. I think there's a wide range of outcomes of just in terms of the usage for the Vikings backfield this week, but with how cheap he is, I think that I'm going to, and how unowned he is, I'm going to have some interest in Cam Akers against this Packers defense, 26 in terms of rush DVOA, and some interest also in, maybe I'll play a little bit of Alexander Madison, but currently we have all the ownership going to Madison. So I think I might pivot and do a little bit of Cam Akers in only the largest field GPPs. So I think that, there are some like reasonable cheap options, not like super cheap, not like super great options, but I think that there are some decent options down here.
Yeah, and there are definitely guys who are mixing and matching, taking some shots on his punt plays. Although I do want to add in one more guy, and I guess technically he is right at the 6K mark. So I should reiterate and say that above 6K, not 6K and above, because I think Bijan Robinson on DraftKings is somebody who the field is probably not going to want to play after what happened last week, where Bijan Robinson, by the way, he's seen a price decrease on FanDuel and DraftKings, 6K on DK, $7,100 on FanDuel. He's projected for some ownership, but it's not a ton. And I tend to think this is one of these scenarios where he ends up being less popular than projected, kind of the inverse. You guys have been watching my NBA shows this week, where we're talking about Wembanyama slates and how people just want to play Wemby no matter what his projection is, because he's very hyped. He's the number 1 overall pick. People are excited about him. So he was a guy who's been projected for like 1% ownership and ends up being like 40% owned on slates. I think the inverse happens here with Bijan Robinson, where he's projected for 12% ownership on FanDuel, 15% on DraftKings. And I think people are not going to want to play him because he got 6 snaps last week, ended up getting 1 touch at the end of the game, but basically hardly played. It was a weird situation. He had a headache that wasn't reported. And then halftime, Arthur Smith's doing an interview and said, hey, Bijan's just not feeling all that good. We don't think he's going to play very much today. But there was no information out about that before the game actually started, which is why people are up in arms. I assume the Falcons are going to get fined and probably docked a draft pick for what happened.
You think so?
Yeah, I think they lose like a 5th or 6th round pick, and they probably get fined like $100,000 for not including him on the injury report. But I think he should be back and he should be fine this week. It's the Falcons. They're very inconsistent with when they give guys touches and what their roles are. But we've seen Bijan Robinson is all the upside in the world, and I do like him to bounce back this week. I think he comes in lower owned than projections because of the nonsense from last week. How do you feel about his workload, though? Like, are you concerned about him long term?
Yeah, I'm not at all concerned about his workload. Like, I think he's probably just going to get back to what his previous workload had been, which already was like, it wasn't as good as you would have hoped coming in. Like, Tyler Algier really has played a good amount of it, but I don't think that they were lying to us. I think that he really did. He had a headache. He couldn't really give it a full go. I assume he's going to get back to the workload he had been getting. The price is pretty nice. I guess my biggest concern there is just the matchup with Tennessee, but at that price tag, given his talent, I think that Bijan is the kind of guy who we might find is able to do it against really elite defenses like the Titans run defense. So I like that call. He's not somebody that I like immediately stands out to me, but like he's only 6,000. That's pretty cheap for Bijan. And even in a tough matchup, especially with the field being completely off him, like I think that you're probably right also about how people are going to react and just be like, all right, I'm done with this guy. So I like that call. I like the call out of Bijan. That is definitely interesting to me. I was just checking how the Colts backfield actually split up last week. Was it really 18 and 18 carries last week for Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss? I think that's, if I'm reading this right, they each got 18 carries last week. So
they ran the ball a ton.
Yeah, I mean that's 36 total carries for the team. That is massive. But Jonathan Taylor, like again, somebody that like didn't immediately jump out to me as a great play, but just looking at that price tag, 6,200 for Jonathan Taylor, a player of his caliber. If you assume that he's going to continue progressing and getting more looks as the season goes along, that is too cheap for Jonathan Taylor, even in a somewhat tough matchup with that Saints run defense. Like that is the downside to it is the matchup with the run defense. But I do think like given the talent, given the price tag for Jonathan Taylor, he's like probably a month from now, he might be up to at least 1,000 more than he is right now. And I don't think we'll ever look back after that point. So looks a little bit too cheap for me. I think that I'd bucket him with Bijan. Like I think they're kind of similar plays where it's like, it's not the best matchup in the world. It's just like bet on the talent and being able to do it at that price tag.
Yeah, maybe I should give him a, ROI boost or, maybe projections. He'll be projected a little bit better tomorrow. But, Zach Moss is also out tomorrow. So maybe that'll just force them to give him a bigger workload. So he's somebody who I'm currently underweight to the field to. But yeah, I think he made a good point. Maybe I should be getting to more of Jonathan Taylor while he is projected for single digit ownership. And there is going to be no Zach Moss. If there was ever a time they were going to ramp him up, it probably would be now. One cheap guy that I'm also getting to on both FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a difficult matchup, but he's so cheap. DeMarcado is $4,800 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, the salary for DeMarcado. Let's see, where did he go? I was getting to him. He was my most rostered value running back on both sites, DeMarcado. So where is that salary for him? Oh, you know why? Because I'm spelling his name wrong. $5,600 for DeMarcado on FanDuel. He's sub 5K over on DK. I don't feel great about the matchup, but he did see double-digit carries last week. He's getting some involvement in the passing game as well. So if you're just going to have somebody who's this cheap that we could expect for like 15 to 18 touches, it's enough workload to where I think he's a decent source of salary savings. If this was a slate where we had a lot of value at our disposal, I probably wouldn't be messing with them. But because we are so hurting for value, I'm taking some shots on him on the low end. Is he somebody that stands out to you at all? Or are there any other really cheap punt plays that you like at running back?
I don't think I'm going to get to DeMarcado. It's at least interesting bringing up how much usage is. Just such a tough spot with Baltimore. And like we've seen, the first week that we thought he was going to be the starter, he was not that involved. And then we saw 1 week where he was clearly the lead back last week. I don't know that I fully trust it with DeMarcado. So I think he's a fine play. I just don't know that I'm going to get there a ton. I don't like these Rams running backs. I would like them better in another matchup. It's similar. Like they're facing the Cowboys. It is a little bit interesting. Like Darrell Henderson last week, and actually let me look up the usage report because that might affect things a little bit. But like we saw Kyron Williams, who I think is a pretty middling talent. These Rams were able to. Kyron Williams putting up big games even in kind of tough matchups. So I'm a little bit interested if Darrell Henderson is going to continue getting. He had 18 rushing attempts last week. That is really, really solid. And then he had in terms of, I guess I don't have passing in front of me. Either way, he had enough usage out there that I do have some interest in Darrell Henderson, I think, as the lead back, just because I think these Rams might be able to run even on tough defenses. So maybe I'll take a couple shots on Darrell Henderson. Not going to be like a huge part of my builds, to be clear, just somebody that I might consider on the cheap end. What about the Browns? Like I guess we have Jerome Ford back. So never mind. I was thinking that we had Jerome Ford out, which would make the Browns running backs a little bit more interesting, but I believe Jerome Ford is expected to play now. Is Zach Moss officially out, or is he questionable still? I thought the latest I had seen was questionable.
I'm fairly sure that Zach Moss is not expected to play.
Okay. I mean, so that just makes Jonathan Taylor is going to look really great if Zach Moss can't go. I was thinking that he was still like iffy, and obviously I was going to say I might play him even if Zach Moss is active, but if he's out, then I think that makes Jonathan Taylor really interesting. I think I don't immediately see any other cheap running backs who are standing out to me. Yeah,
and one other thing to add about the Browns situation is it looked like Ford was going to absolutely break the slate last week, because he was, his second carry of the game was like a 70-yard touchdown run, and he'd one rush. I think his final total was after that long touchdown. I think he finished with 1 net yard the rest of the game. Is that about correct?
Might have even been negative. No, I think you're right. He did get, he got like one yard. Yeah, I forgot about that. That was just like immediately like, oh my God, what a smash play, and then just didn't do anything the rest of the game. I think you're right. It's something like that, close to like 1 yard.
Yeah. So by the way, Moss is not officially out, but there are a lot of reports indicating he's more likely to sit than play. So we're going to need an official update there. But I'm currently making the assumption that Moss is not going to play. We'll see, though.
That's fair.
We'll see what ends up happening. And Henderson, for people talking about it in the chat, he has been called up from the practice squad again and played a pretty substantial role for the Rams in that first game being active. Anything else you want to talk about at running back, Neil?
Yeah, Colin says, isn't Ford questionable? I think that Jerome Ford might still be listed as questionable, but I think that he's, as of right now, expected to play. I guess well something to monitor. If he's out, then maybe the Cleveland guys will become interesting. Here's an off the wall galaxy brain kind of thought process. With Derrick Henry being on the trade block, does that make Tyjae Spears a little bit more playable at 4,700? Like just like maybe in game they or they just like don't give him his usual usage. Like maybe Tyjae Spears is somebody we can consider.
Yeah, if Henry is inactive, which my gut feeling is that Henry isn't going to play tomorrow.
Oh, really? Okay. I mean, in that case, that changes everything. Yeah.
If that is the case, then yes, Spears for sure. But I'm kind of expecting that we're going to get that report, and this is based on nothing but intuition. But I think that there's a very good chance we get that report from like Adam Schefter late tonight that the Titans are in ongoing trade talks with Derrick Henry, so they're going to hold him out for precautionary reasons. Just intuition, nothing else to it. If that does happen, then yes, Tyjae Spears would look really good. We haven't heard anything on Derrick Henry other than he's in trade rumors and the Titans are looking to move him. Considering what his workload has been the last few years, the injuries he's dealt with, and the fact that we know how often running backs get injured, if they really are trying to trade him, like why would you play him this week? The season is going nowhere at this point. Yeah,
I mean, I hadn't even thought about him being inactive, but like certainly if he's inactive, Tyjae Spears is going to pop as a value play. That's something, definitely a situation to monitor. And I guess that's something like this is one of those weeks that you just need to be on the news. Like for NFL, it's usually not as big of a concern, but with the trade deadline coming up on Tuesday, like just make sure that you are paying attention to the news.
Yeah, and then also everything always updated on our site. By the time we get to Sunday, we get everything. Like if Derrick Henry's ruled out, it'll be reflected in our contest generator, in our Sims tool, in our projections, ownership projections, boom bust tool. If you guys want access to everything, which is all under one package now at Stokastic.com, sign up using the link below to get access to our NFL package. And if you're looking to play NBA DFS, we have a promo going on for our NBA package, which is only going to exist for a couple more days. We've got, for the first week of the NBA season, we're offering a promo code TIPOFF, which is going to get you 20% off our NBA package. And then that deal is going away. So you only have a few days to take advantage of the 20% sign up offer. So you've been considering playing NBA DFS this year, or trying out our new contest generator, our new Sims tool, our new NBA late swap tool. Sign up now, because that 20% off is not going to be available a few days from now. Wide receivers here, Neil. And while I'm not paying up for a lot of the expensive quarterbacks or a lot of the expensive running backs, I am paying up at tight end a little bit for Travis Kelce. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But then also, my most rostered wide receiver for the slate is currently Tyreek Hill. I'm getting to a good amount of Hill on the high end. He's very expensive, paying $9,500 for him on DraftKings, and also his big price point over on FanDuel, where Tyreek Hill is priced at also the same $9,500. It precludes you from spending up at other spots, but he's my favorite pay up option on the slate. Of any quarterback, running back, wide receiver you could pay up for, Tyreek Hill is my guy. Do you agree with Hill? Is there somebody else you prefer to pay up for?
Yeah, I agree with it. I would imagine that I will not be with you though, as Tyreek Hill being my highest owned, because as I said, I'm forcing in kind of the elite quarterback. So I would imagine that I'm actually not going to be with you as much on Tyreek Hill. It's a tough matchup. He's so elite right now. He's so good that he certainly can get it done in any matchup. It's just a matter of, I think I'm going to be targeting the spots where I think the team is going to put up more points. Obviously we know the Dolphins can do it. Against this Patriots defense, but I think I'm probably not going to be with you as in terms of Hill being one of my highest exposed players, only because I'm going to be forcing in some of the elite wide receiver stacks. So I'm going to get to AJ Brown at 8,000 a little bit more. I'm going to get to pay up with Lamar, and I'm going to be pairing him, I guess, not with nobody too expensive. We have Zay Flowers at 5,600, so kind of value options there. But then we'll pairing Lamar with Flowers and Andrews probably going to prohibit me from getting to as much Tyreek Hill as I would otherwise. So yeah, I think that he's obviously a great play. Basically any week Tyreek Hill is very much in play, but I think that I'm actually going to be getting to the other elite receivers a little bit more, in particular AJ Brown.
Okay, so AJ Brown for you, he's a little bit cheaper than Tyreek Hill, actually quite a bit cheaper. He is $1,500 cheaper over on DraftKings, only $800 cheaper on FanDuel. AJ Brown, $8,700 on FanDuel, with also Jalen Hurts being really expensive. It is a stack that, while the upside is really high, it's pretty hard to fit in on FanDuel. Same with DraftKings, although FanDuel even a little bit more pricey. As far as me in that other price range, so if I'm not spending all the way up to Tyreek Hill, I like getting to CeeDee Lamb. And this is primarily just because he correlates well with what I'm doing with Dak Prescott and Cowboys stacks. So I'm getting to more of CeeDee Lamb than AJ Brown. It is a few $1,000s less expensive than the Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown combination. So I like the salary savings I'm getting here with CeeDee Lamb. Is there anybody that you like in like this 7K type range?
Yeah, so CeeDee Lamb, I'm right there with you. We have him a little bit under owned right now, 8% projected ownership, 11% chance of being optimal. Looks really great. Man, it's like, I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to fully fade Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. Like, they just get so much usage and their offense has been so good. I'll probably get to a little bit. The prices are so far up there and the matchup is so tough that I don't know that I'm going to be like going out of my way getting a crazy amount of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but maybe I'll get to some of them in those Cowboys stacks. So I'll have CeeDee Lamb on the one side, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua on the other side of the game. So I could see myself getting there a little bit. Obviously Jamar Chase is in play. We just saw the Vikings, like, that Niners defense, like, I think that it's a legitimately great defense, but then we just saw the Vikings tear them up. Certainly the Bengals, if Joe Burrow is healthy, could get back into it. So I think Jamar Chase is at least interesting. My guess is that I'll be underweight to the field on Jamar Chase. We have projected for around 17% ownership, 14% chance to be an optimal, but I can't completely write him off. Yeah, of these guys, I think AJ Brown is my favorite pay up option. I'll probably play, and this is, I guess under that 7K threshold, but I'll probably still take some shots on Devontae Smith. Hasn't really happened yet this year. Devontae Smith has had kind of a down year. It's been like totally the AJ Brown show, and they haven't really had any reason to get away from it in Philadelphia. But I do think Devontae Smith at 6,700, I kind of love that. Like, it's just against that Commanders defense where you do see just like big plays happen. Why can't it be Devontae Smith making that splash play against the Commanders defense? And we've got him at just 1% ownership. So I think Devontae Smith is actually going to be somebody that I'm well over the field on here.
Not hard to, just considering what his ownership is. If you like Jalen Hurts stacks, it would make sense. You'd be really contrarian by pairing him there with Devontae Smith. And I wish Smith's price point would have gone down a little bit because he's had such a disappointing season. I mean,
Yeah.
he has scored 9 or less fantasy points in what, 4 or 5 of the 6 last games. And just neither DraftKings nor FanDuel have significantly lowered his price point. So he's somebody to like pay up to be contrarian with. I understand the logic. I don't think I'm going to quite get there just because I am so cost conscious on this slate. Unless we get the scenario where Tajay Spears becomes a viable
Yeah.
option for us at running back tomorrow, that would save some salary and let me pay up a little bit more elsewhere. But yeah, 7K range for me, it's going to be CeeDee Lamb. If I'm paying all the way up, it is Tyreek Hill is my preferred option. And then if I'm getting into like that 5K-ish type range, this is where a handful of guys really stand out to me. Like Terry McLaurin is somebody who having about 20% of lineups on first run. I like Zay Flowers. I like George Pickens. This is a spot where I really get the bulk of my exposure to at wide receiver. And then another one, Deontay Johnson, way too cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings, which is another reason why I get to Kenny Pickett. Less to do with Kenny Pickett as much as he's very cheap. And then also he's got a target here in Deontay Johnson, who's underpriced on both FanDuel and DraftKings, working himself back from hamstring injury. So Johnson is my cheapish wide receiver that I have the most exposure to. What are you liking on the lower end of wide receiver, whether it's Deontay Johnson or somebody else do you think is a good source of salary savings?
Yeah, I mean, Zay Flowers, because I'm going to a lot of those Lamar stacks, like 5,600 Zay Flowers is just a little bit too cheap for me. I think that I'm going to be back in there with Zay Flowers again. Nico Collins, I think it's just too cheap for the matchup and for his involvement. Like he's just been so good this year, 5,500 against that Panthers defense. I'm going to be stacking him up a little bit with CJ Stroud. So 5,500 Nico Collins, definitely going to be a big part of my lineups. Yeah, as I said, I mean, I'm going to be paying up a good amount. Tank Dell 4,900 I think is similar to Nico Collins. I think like we've seen Tank Dell just have those absolute blow up games. He's coming back this week, 12% projected ownership, 8% chance to be an optimal. So a little bit of negative leverage there, but I'm definitely going to include him in some CJ Stroud stacks and maybe as a bring back in some Bryce Young stacks as well. He's definitely interesting. KJ Osborne, like he's been like fine. I don't know that KJ Osborne is somebody that I really want to be playing, but against that Packers defense, maybe Jair Alexander is shadowing Jordan Addison a little bit. So maybe KJ Osborne has more opportunities. He had a couple blow up games last year. So at 4,700, 1.5% projected ownership and kind of a nice matchup against the Packers, I think you can make a case for KJ Osborne as being a pretty interesting contrarian low price play this weekend. And then, we talked about the Cowboys and how much we like playing those DAC stacks. I mean, Brandon Cooks is just 4,600. We've got where Michael Gallup is. I just saw it and then I lost it. What is the price tag on Gallup?
Yeah, so Gallup is somebody who also makes it into some of my lineups just because it also makes sense with Prescott stacks. $3,400 over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Gallup is $5,500. So fairly cheap on both sites.
Yeah, I mean that's 3,400 way too cheap for Michael Gallup. I shouldn't say way too cheap. Like it's probably fair, but a reasonable price tag. If you're trying to pay up to be contrarian with your quarterback stacks, maybe Gallup somebody you can consider in terms of just bringing down your salary a little bit. And then Cooks, 4,600 too cheap. So I think that I'm going to be mixing up all the ways that I'm going to those Dallas receivers here. I think that we do have some interesting cheaper options at wide receiver. Obviously, the more expensive guys are always going to be more projectable, look a little bit better, but I do think with those Cowboys guys, some of the other players I mentioned, Rashid Shaheed, we talked about those Saints stacks. I think Shaheed is in play at 3,900. Just hope that he can blast one off there. So some interest there. Going back up a little bit more, it should be a fast-paced game, I think, between the Colts and the Saints. So maybe getting back to the mid-range, you could take some shots on Pittman and Olave. It's not the best game environment in the world. Don't love playing against those defenses, but just given the pacing of the game that I would expect, I think Pittman and Olave are both sort of in play. Just getting back up briefly to the higher end. Trying to see if there's any other cheaper wide receivers. I mean, I've named a bunch already that I have some interest in that I'm probably going to be mixing and matching in there to get to my elite quarterbacks. You could take shots if you want to play for under the theory that the Panthers are going to switch things up with the offensive coordinator taking over play call, and maybe this is a week that we finally see something out of one of the non-Thielen Panthers receivers. I don't know that it's worth really taking a shot there, but 1.5% ownership for Mingo at 3,400. I'll at least consider it.
Do you have anything else I want to add at wide receiver? Anything else you want to throw in?
Um, I don't think so. I think that we've largely mentioned everybody that I'm interested in playing.
All right. So we will go ahead and talk about the tight ends, and we'll give out our favorite stacks of the weekend to close out the show. And one more thing that I want to tell you guys about here is that Bet365, they've got this great deal. When you guys are signing up for the first time using the link we have below, they're only available in a few states, but the offer is just such a no-brainer. You bet $5 on Bet365, you can get $150 in bonus bets. Easy way to pad your wallet with some money. This is the simplest way that you're going to be able to make money in the DFS or sports betting space. It is available Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, Colorado, and they do have a special offer available in Kentucky where it's actually bet $1 and get $365. So if you live in one of those 6 states and you haven't taken advantage of the Bet365 offer, do it before the deal runs out, because it's just a very easy way to make yourself some extra money. If you're anybody you know has a gambling problem, call or text the number 1-800-GAMBLER. Tight end, Neil, this is a position that is pretty difficult to fill. There's 4 guys that are really core plays for me at tight end that I'm kind of building around. I'm wondering if you could guess who those 4 are.
I'm going to guess Hawkinson.
Okay. You're 1 for 1 so far.
All right. Hang on. Let me see.
One of these is very easy.
Kelsey.
Okay. You're 2 for 2. That was the easy one. That's the lay. You got to get Travis Kelsey's a layup.
Yeah. Travis Kelsey is a layup. Jake Ferguson.
You're 3 for 3.
All right. Who else is Greg going to play? Now, this. I feel like it's tough now. And by the way, these 3 have all been, in terms of our optimal odds, they're 3 of our top 4 in terms of optimal odds. So I'm a little bit tempted to just go to that other one in the optimal odds range, especially because you did mention some interest in that game environment there. I'm going to skip over it, though. I'm going to go to... No, I'm not. I'm just going to go to Evan Ingram.
It is Trey McBride.
That was the one I was going to go to when I said I was going to skip over. And then I was like, no, Trey McBride. All right. Damn it. I was so close. Yeah.
He's $2,800 on DraftKings. He got 6 targets last week, got 5 targets the week before. And we see these situations all the time with tight ends where, and also FanDuel, he's $4,700. So we see these situations with tight ends where there have been, actually, if I remember this correctly, I think Isaiah Likely, when he was in the million-making winning lineup on FanDuel week 1, was also $4,700 and he'd 1 catch for 7 yards. Like, that was his stat line, and because tight ends suck so much, it was just he's the cheapest wide receiver who scored more than 0 fantasy points. Therefore, he ended up being in the winning lineup on FanDuel. And Trey McBride could kind of end up being in a similar situation if you get to a spot where like Kelsey doesn't go off. Maybe you just need a cheap tight end. He's super cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings. He's going to be popular, but I think it's warranted considering the uptick in his workload as of late. You also have Zach Ertz, who started off the year pretty decently, but you always see this with Zach Ertz. He can only stay healthy for so long. As he starts to get banged up and the season goes on, teams have to look elsewhere at the tight end spot. So I think Trey McBride, it's going to be the start of him taking over as the primary tight end for the Cardinals, which I think is going to be the case for the next 5-6 years or so. So those are the 4 tight ends that I'm really building around. Do you dislike any of those tight ends, Neil, or is there anybody else they're adding to the mix?
I don't think I'm going to be with you on Trey McBride just because of how good the Ravens defense is. I understand it. Like he is too cheap, and he does have a significant role there. So I get the play. I just don't. I feel like the upside is really limited there. So I don't think I'm with you on Trey McBride. Everybody else, I think I'm definitely with you on Hawkinson. Like 12 targets last week with no Jefferson. Travis Kelsey he's Travis Kelsey. No explanation needed. Jake Ferguson, 3,600. I like the game environment. So I'm with you on 3 of the 4. I think Trey McBride to me is just he's going to get into so many lineups because he's so cheap, and I'm just going to probably fade it. Maybe not full fade, but like I'm going to be underweight to 15% and just hope that he doesn't find the end zone, because I understand like he doesn't need to do, like he could have 6 catches for 40 yards and that's going to be 10 fantasy points. That's fine for 2,800. I'm just going to at least hope that he doesn't do anything to kill me. I feel like it's a little bit unlikely that he's going to kill me. I just don't think that he has a ton of talent and he's in a really tough matchup. So I think I'm out on Trey McBride. Some other place that I like going, Dalton Schultz. We talked about how much I like those Texan stacks. Dalton Schultz can be a big part of those. Obviously talked about Lamar. I'm going to like some Mark Andrews, 5.3% projected ownership for Andrews, 6.7% chance being optimal. Those are great odds. Andrews, one of the few tight ends who can totally break a slate. So I do have interest in Andrews. Similarly, Dallas Goedert, like I like those Jalen Hurts stacks. Dallas Goedert going to be a part of my Jalen Hurts stacks. I'm torn about Darren Waller. My guess is that I'm going to be overweight to the field, but only because the field is at 0.5%. So like I get him in a lineup, I'm going to be overweight to the field on Darren Waller. Tough matchup with the Jets. He was good. Like Tyrod Taylor actually like was able to, stay out there long enough to find targets for Darren Waller and like actually targeted Darren Waller. So I think that it's a great spot in terms of Tyrod Taylor appears to be more focused on Darren Waller than Daniel Jones ever was. It's a tough matchup with the Jets. So I can't go overboard with Darren Waller, but I do think like if we see elite usage, I think Darren Waller is still an elite tight end. So some interest in Darren Waller just because of the price tag and having Tyrod Taylor actually focusing on him a little bit more.
Anything else you want to add here?
I don't think so. I don't think there's anybody else that really stands out to me that I love here.
All right, so let's go ahead and do our favorite stacks of the week. So Neil, if you're just building one lineup, whether it be single entry, a large field tournament, who would be the quarterback and his pass catchers you'd be going to in that lineup?
Well, you know how I love going to the elite quarterback with his number 2 pass catching option. I'm going to do that here. I'm going to go to Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith as my stack.
Double stack for me, it is going to be Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Jake Ferguson. That is a stack combination I'm getting to a good amount now. And I think it really makes sense. Not too crazy in terms of ownership. I like the salary savings it affords me. So that's a place that I like going to. And pretty good chance that is going to be what I end up with in my single entry lineup as well for this weekend. So guys, thank you very much for watching. If you're not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to DraftKings Rainmakers for sponsoring the show. Use that link below if you want to claim your totally free starters pack. Hope one of us wins $1 million this week. Every week I've been predicting it's going to be me. I haven't been correct yet, but maybe this will be the slate. Guys, good luck. See you back here next weekend.